Good morning, everyone. This is Cindy Clowner, Program Manager of the Ohio College Initiative at Drug Free Action Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am joined with Dr. Steve Gavazzi, Dean at The Ohio State University Mansfield and creator of the Optimal College Town Assessment, which is an integral part of the pilot that we are discussing today. So I think all of you are joining us because you're interested in possibly applying for the pilot opportunity, and we're really excited about it. And we just want to give you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about kind of how the pilot came to exist, a little more context around it, and provide some opportunity for questions that you can ask so that you have a better understanding of what exactly it is. And we hope that at the end you'll be excited about your campus engaging in this. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I do want to mention before we move a little bit too far, you do have an opportunity to ask questions using your panel on the side. There's a question box there that you can enter them. You also have the ability to raise your hand. We'll answer questions as best as we can as we move through the webinar, but we will be sure to answer all of your questions before we end the webinar today. So for those of you who are with us, I think a lot of you are familiar with the Ohio College Initiative. We're really excited because this is our 20th anniversary. We've been doing this work for 20 years. The Ohio College Initiative was the first of its kind in the entire country for campuses to come together and work together to address high-risk drinking, which was the focus at the time when we first started. And the Ohio College Initiative has expanded its view and looked at addressing other substances as well as looking at how we can support mental health issues, promote mental health on campus. And at the core of what we do, though, is really around reducing risk related to high-risk drinking, reducing those harms. And so when the Ohio College Initiative first started, there was a big focus on this thing called environmental prevention, which was looking at how we can address the environment to reduce those harms. And so environmental prevention, when we talk about it, we're looking at strategies that change and influence community conditions, standards, institution structures, systems, and policies. So when we talk about the environment, we might be talking about the physical environment, and when we talk specifically about alcohol, it could be the number of alcohol establishments that are around a campus or within a community. When we talk about environment, we could be referring to it socially and the attitudes and behaviors of the people around us, as well as we could be talking about the cultural environment and what are the cultural norms about acceptable use. So our goal is that if we change the environment to support low-risk alcohol use, then we'll reduce the number of alcohol-related problems that people experience. So a lot of campuses may focus on individual prevention, which is providing services that change the knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs of a person when it comes to their substance use. And that is really important. But what we know when it comes to effective prevention is that we need a combination of those individual level strategies combined with environmental level strategies. And so here are kind of gives us an idea of what we're focusing on and what we're working to change when it comes to environmental prevention. So if we look at norms, policies, and availability, we can have a greater impact than we can when we are working one-on-one or in small groups as individual strategies typically are. So we're working to change norms, and we could do that through social media campaigns or through campaigns in general, as well as through education. We're looking at changing availability and access, so maybe limiting the amount of vendors that serve alcohol in an area, making sure that students who are underage don't have access to alcohol through compliance checks and ID checks, as well as working to enhance policies and increase enforcement around the policies that we already do have. And when we address those things, we have the ability to change the environment and have a larger impact on the entire population of a campus and community, not just on the smaller numbers of people that might be individually seeking our services. So that's one of the reasons why we think environmental prevention is so important and it's so necessary, but we know that to do it and to do it well, it requires partnerships. And so the Ohio College Initiative has really been focused on building these partnerships between campuses and communities. This year, it's really an effort to get back to our roots because that was really what the Ohio College Initiative, when it first started 20 years ago, was all about, building campus and community coalitions to address these environmental factors that impact high-risk drinking. And so when we think about partnerships, we may find those partnerships on campus. And when I looked at those of you who were registered for our webinar, a lot of you come from your wellness office. There were quite a few of you that were in counseling or in other student life entities. So all of those units within student life are important: wellness, counseling, student health, res life, Greek life, athletics, even dining services, particularly if they are responsible for the catering on campus and catering serves alcohol. They should be at the table in terms of being a partner in this effort. Upper level administrators and of course campus safety, and this list is not all inclusive. Everyone who is interested in student success and recognizes that alcohol misuse can impact student success should have an interest in this, and sometimes it's just getting them to understand their connection to this issue. But we also have partners off campus, and that might be in the form of business leaders, our government, law enforcement, our bar owners, or our vendors who are selling alcohol, and community members at large. So we have a lot of people that we can draw from to work together for this issue. And when it comes to off-campus, of course, when we are addressing high-risk alcohol issues off-campus, that impacts the community in general, not just those members of the community who are also engaged with the campus. So there should be even more incentive for a community to become engaged, and because they should be concerned about their underage students, their high school students, their middle school students, and these environmental strategies are true across the age range, that if we make an impact on the environment in which people live in regards to how they view alcohol and how they have access to alcohol and the policies around alcohol, we can reduce alcohol harms, whether you are a 17-year-old or you're a 20-year-old or even older. But we also know that for those of you on campuses and in communities with campuses, that having a healthy town-gown relationship is really, really important if we want these environmental strategies to succeed. So campuses have much more control over some of these strategies that may happen within their campus. So there's some things that we can do environmentally on campus, but when we start looking at environmental strategies and implementing those off campus, we really need a healthy town-gown relationship, a healthy campus-community relationship for those strategies to succeed. And because this has really been a focus of ours this year, we've been engaging with Dr. Gavazzi, who, like I mentioned before, created the optimal college town assessment, which can help campuses and communities identify the type of relationship they have in the areas in which they can improve. And so I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself and his work, and he's going to share a little bit more about the OCTA.
All right, well, thank you very much, Cindy, and thanks also to the Drug Free Action Alliance for allowing us to move forward on this pilot opportunity. I'm sure that I've met several of you through any number of the Ohio College Initiative events that I've taken part in this past year, and it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, to wed some of the things that I've been doing with some colleagues around town-gown relationships, campus-community relationships, if you will, and looking at environmental factors. And I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about how we got to this point. And the story really begins with my reminding people of my marriage and family therapy background. I had come to Ohio and to the Ohio State University 26 years ago now in order to help them to create an approved program in marriage and family therapy. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is just simply to tell folks that I've always seen things in terms of a relationship lens. And so when I took the reins of the Ohio State University's Mansfield campus about 6.5 years ago, I recognized that something very different was happening in terms of the campus-community relationship there than I had experienced in the previous 20 years being on the Columbus campus. And that is to say that whereas in Columbus, I think that you get the sense that there is widespread recognition of the importance of Ohio State's campus in Columbus, it was far less clear in Mansfield what the role of Ohio State Mansfield really was. And it got me to begin thinking about how it is that relationships between campuses and communities vary as a function of a number of different things. So to get to the point of the slide that you all are now looking at in terms of this typology, I'll just give you a little bit of background for those of you who've not heard me talk about this schematic before. I was on the phone probably 6 months into my tenure as the Dean and Director of the Ohio State Mansfield campus, and I was on the phone with one of the largest donors in the area. And this individual was reading me the Riot Act and yelling at me for something that had happened approximately 15 years, that's right, 15 years before I took office. And this individual was just simply spouting off in ways in which he was trying to make it clear that he did not want to have these awful things happen again during the time in which I was the dean. Well, I had my clinical hat on, so I listened very politely to this individual as he kind of wound himself down. And then he thanked me at the end and said, you know, he was really happy to know that I was on board and that I was going to make sure that the campus-community relationship was going to be moving in the right direction. So on the way home, I had this nagging sense that I had run into this situation before, but literally I never had. Again, very new to the scene in Mansfield and very new in terms of being a dean. But it then struck me where I thought that I had heard this before. It actually was very similar to a marriage therapy session that I was directing a while back, in which the husband was yelling at his wife for something that she had done before they met. So I thought to myself, oh, isn't that interesting? Town-gown relationships are just like marriages. And then I thought to myself, wait a second, there's really something there. The schematic that you're looking at really comes from some of the early marital therapy literature, which looks at relationships between spouses as a combination of two factors, effort and comfort. And in this schematic, the most functional relationship, the best relationship to be in, is the relationship that consists of high effort and high comfort. That's the harmonious relationship. So here, what you're really trying to do is imagine a situation in which both partners are trying really hard to make the relationship work, and as a result, they're really increasing the level of comfort that each of them has inside of that relationship. That's where we all want to be, and by the way, that's a moving target. You don't just simply make that relationship happen and then all of a sudden you don't have to put effort into it anymore. Of course, you have to continue to provide that effort in order to create that comfort. Now, you can be putting a lot of effort into relationships, but not gaining the comfort level, and that's typically the conflicted relationship. That's where we see high effort. People are putting a lot of energy into the relationship, but they're fighting all of the time. And in a conflicted relationship, what ends up happening is oftentimes you forget what you're even fighting about because you get locked into what's called a conflict habituated relationship, where you're fighting just because that becomes the norm inside of the relationship. Now, you could get lucky. You could not necessarily be putting a lot of effort into your relationship, but you still might result in a higher level of comfort, certainly than in the conflicted relationship. That's what we call the traditional relationship. Now, for those of you who are as old or older than I am, you will remember the Dick Van Dyke Show. This is kind of the Rob and Laura Petrie relationship. You will recall that they slept in separate beds. They had separate lives. This is what I think is very much a vanishing species these days in terms of at least marital relationships. And then finally, you get the worst of all the relationships, which is the devitalized relationship, in which there's low effort and low comfort. And this is really a typology of folks who are headed towards a divorce. Now, if we apply this to campus community relationships, we see remarkable similarities. For those relationships between town and gown entities that are the result of high effort and high comfort, you do see a harmonious relationship. Likewise, you see that there are lots of campuses and communities that seem to be locked into a habitual way of being in conflict with one another. Those would be the conflicted relationships. The traditional relationship would kind of be that separate but equal. It's kind of like you stay on your side of the geography and we'll stay on ours. Again, probably as much a vanishing species in terms of campus community relationships as they are in terms of marriages. And then finally, the devitalized relationship. This is where folks have really just given up on each other. The campus and community have gotten to an impasse, and unlike marriages, campuses and communities cannot really get a divorce from one another. Very, very rarely do we see a university actually pull its stakes up and leave. The only way that that really happens is if, of course, the university actually folds. So we tried this typology out back in 2014. We took it to the International Town Gown Association Conference, and it was, to put it mildly, wildly accepted as an avenue for talking about campus community relationships. In fact, the session that I did with my colleagues, both Mike Fox from Mount Allison University and Jeff Martin from Clemson University, was standing room only. And afterwards, most of the folks who were talking with us asked us if there wasn't a way of actually measuring this. And so what we actually then did was we got ourselves to a place where, and again, the slide now is showing the introduction to an article that Mike Fox and I wrote in the journal Innovative Higher Education. We made the case for actually measuring campus community relationships as the combination of effort and comfort. By the way, that first article that we wrote on the typology is also inside of the same journal, Innovative Higher Education. And for those of you who want copies of any of the materials that I'm describing today, I'm more than happy to send you electronic copies. So the Optimal College Town Assessment, which is now conducted under the auspices of the College Town Assessment, which was a limited liability corporation that was set up simply to handle the business of making these kinds of things available to folks at a nominal charge. What you see is a web-based assessment tool, and this is just simply one of many, many questions that we have embedded inside of the Optimal College Town Assessment framework. This particular one, I don't know how hard it is for you all to read, but it says, how active do you believe the following groups of people are in terms of contributing to the well-being of the community as a whole? This is one of those action-oriented items, which leads itself to then being in the dimension of effort. And you can see then that we have asked that question on a range of not active at all to moderately active to extremely active on a 5-point Likert scale. And in this particular case, we're asking about 4 groups of people: students, faculty, staff and administration, and board members, governing board members. There are 16 items in the core Optimal College Town Assessment, and then there are approximately 45 additional items that talk about a variety of different campus community relationship factors. And those include everything from the kinds of things that are happening in the way of the campus reaching out to the community with regards to a number of different efforts and activities, to the ways in which the campus and community interact around public safety issues, how the media plays a role in the development of the climate that surrounds the campus community relationship, and so on. So the next slide that we then see, I hope it's coming up here. I'm trying to get it to advance. Is simply then a way of helping folks to understand that there is a resource that's available to you. It's a book that I wrote last year, published last year, which the title of it says it all, which is The Optimal Town-Gown Marriage. This is really the way in which you can create optimal environments. This is a story of how I did the work that I did in the community of Mansfield, alongside the relationship that I also had with a co-located technical college, North Central State College, and how we attempted to elevate our outreach and engagement levels to the degree to which we could develop a more harmonious relationship. Within this book, there are a lot of different things that I think are useful, some of which we will talk about a little later on in the webinar, but I do want to point out that there also are these 10 commandments of town-gown relationships that I think are particularly important to pay attention to as we talk about the relationship between the campus and the community around alcohol prevention issues. The first 4 of the town-gown commandments, and I'm not going to recite all of them to you, but they all have to do with the high priority that has to be given to creating more harmonious relationships between campuses and communities. The commandments talk about the need to understand how much time it takes to do that, and that there needs to be a level playing field in which you seek win-win outcomes whenever and wherever possible inside of these campus community interactions. The 5th, 6th, and 7th commandments with regards to how to develop more harmonious town-gown relationships have to do with the 3 key partnerships that have to do with the interaction that occurs between the campus and the community. First and foremost, or actually in commandment number 5, it has to do with the role that students play, because there is widespread recognition that students are the most important point of contact between a campus and community. Also, the power of the alumni, especially those alumni that are living in the communities that are immediately surrounding the campus. And then also the faculty members themselves, who oftentimes are representing the face of both the campus and the community. The final 3 commandments have to do with the past, knowing something about the past, the present, and the future of the town-gown relationship. Harkening back to my own story about inheriting the relationship that I did inside of the Mansfield community, and by the way, the surrounding communities of Ontario and Shelby, there very much was a history. And it wasn't necessarily a glowing history. There were plenty of landmines that I had inherited that I really needed to pay attention to as I attempted to build out those harmonious relationships. But also the fact that we did the assessment in April of 2014 to actually use the pilot of the OCTA to see how well it worked. This gave us an idea about where we stood in the eyes of the community at that time, and of course where we still needed to go in terms of improvement. And then the last of the 10 commandments has to do with the Boy Scout motto, which is, "Thou shalt leave the campus-community relationship in better shape than you found it." And I think that that's a good segue here to some of the other things that we want to talk about, because it's important to be laying a groundwork for the future of the campus-community relationship. Oftentimes what happens is if we attempt to stick Band-Aids on things, these things end up backfiring either for us or for the people who come after us. We really need to attempt to create longer-term solutions to the inevitable challenges that campuses and communities are facing. And that brings us to really the next part of this webinar, which is being able to pay attention to what's happening inside of alcohol use. Again, just to, Cindy, I'm trying to advance the slides. I'm having a difficult time doing that. Here talking now about underage alcohol consumption and other forms of student misbehavior. There really are 2 things that seem to drive negative relationships between campuses and communities more than anything else. And the top one is student misbehavior. The other one, though, that I'll mention is land use. often as not, there are lots of tensions that exist between campuses and communities as universities attempt to either utilize the land that they already own in ways that aren't necessarily beneficial, at least immediately, to the surrounding community, and or the university purchasing additional land for use by the university. There are lots of problems inherent to that, including the destruction of neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods, but also every time a campus buys property, it's taking that property off the tax rolls. And so there's now a lot of interest in things like pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes, because again, as universities acquire that land, it becomes something that the community no longer can rely on as a source of income. So land use certainly is an important part, but the student misbehavior, which often as not is fueled by underage alcohol consumption, is really one of the driving forces here. So if we can go then to the next slide. What I want to now share with you is just a little bit of information about what I have discussed in the Optimal Town-Gown Marriage book, which is in part a chapter that I did on interviews that occurred among university presidents and city managers. And I had targeted a number of what we would call classic college towns. And there's a definition of college towns that's typically used where if students are at least 20% of the population of a given municipality, that's typically what we would call the classic college town. And so I had actually grabbed 4 university presidents and 4 city managers from these classic college towns to ask them about the kinds of things that go into the creation of harmonious relationships. And by the way, that's really where the initial work was done on those the 10 commandments of town-gown relationships. But of most importance here for our webinar today is that I thought it was really interesting that almost all of the participants, in fact it was everyone but one of the interviewees, brought up some form of issue related to student misbehavior, and that this occurred without me asking specifically about that. So in the vast majority of cases, the student misbehavior did in fact surround alcohol issue. And here's just one quote from a city manager. Again, the first underscore that I would have you look at here is that this particular city manager is saying that students are the most critical element that flows into how well town-gown relationships operate. And he goes on to say it's also the most difficult set of relationships because they're temporary, and of course because they really haven't developed into fully matured adults at that point in time. And so again, the idea here is that if there are problems that exist between the campus and the community, it's likely the result of the student misbehavior. We have a little model that we're using here in this pilot study, which Cindy had already covered the environmental factors. It leads obviously directly into the relationship that the campus and community enjoy together, whether it's harmonious, conflicted, traditional, or devitalized. But we also, you can see in this model here, we think that student misbehavior plays a moderating role in the relationship as well. So in other words, the degree to which there are higher levels of student misbehavior, that's the degree to which the campus-community relationship quality goes down. Now, in the pilot data that we have collected to date, which includes quite a number of universities, I'll just mention some of them. Salisbury University in Maryland, DePaul in Chicago, Ohio University, both its Athens campus as well as 5 of its regional campuses, and Clemson University. And I think that those may be the main ones that have used the student misbehavior items that I can report on here. We do in fact see quite a significant relationship between the amount of student misbehavior and the overall quality of the town-gown relationship. So the higher the level of student misbehavior, the lower the level of the quality, both in terms of effort and comfort that are being faced. So advancing then to the next slide, we have 4 sets of items that Cindy and I had worked together on, and obviously with other folks from the Ohio College Initiative, to look at some new items that we could add to the to the Optimal College Town Assessment. And that included, first, as you see, the trouble that's caused at various places, both in the campus and on the campus and in the community, where students are basically partying. Also, understanding which are the wildest nights of the partying, and so understanding, Sunday through Saturday, where are the biggest problem spots. The extent to which there are potential problems directly related to that student partying, and of course you can think of all the ones, noise, trash, other kinds of complaints. And then fourth and finally, the extent to which the student partying puts some sort of direct strain and a noticeable strain on the campus-community relationship.
Well, thank you, Steve. Steve has mentioned the questions that we have added to the OCTA that are related to, that are specific to alcohol, and I just want to kind of break down how these questions can help us inform prevention, because ultimately that's really what our pilot is about, is collecting this data. And of course you're going to have a lot of data beyond alcohol-specific data, but then developing a plan to be able to utilize this data to address environmental factors that may be influencing high-risk alcohol use on your campus and within your community. And so Steve talked about some of the items that we've added, and these questions relate to those. So when we ask where are students drinking in high-risk ways, that can help us identify where we should be targeting our efforts. When we look at when students are engaging in the heaviest drinking, we can consider policies and alternatives to drinking that we can implement that can help address these high-risk times, either whether that be days or certain periods of time during the calendar year in which students are drinking heaviest. What negative consequences are occurring because of high-risk drinking. Again, we can look at ordinances, enforcement, and awareness messaging that we can implement to address the concerns of these negative consequences. And to what extent are these behaviors impacting the community? Will there be challenges to gaining buy-in? And some of you may be coming to the table already with buy-in already from both your campus and community. Some of you may be working towards gaining that buy-in, and of course you may have buy-in from your campus and challenges from engaging with your community. You may have buy-in from certain sectors of your community and are facing challenges with gaining buy-in with your campus. But the OCTA is going to help identify some places where we can work and implement specific prevention strategies to be able to address those issues that have been identified. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into the actual pilot study. Who should be thinking about participating in the pilot study? If you are a campus and community that already has an established working relationship, would obviously be most ideal, because the pilot is going to require that you have a campus and community relationship. If you're interested in measuring the overall quality of your town-gown relationship, of course, the Ohio College Initiative is really interested in a very small piece of the Optimal College Town Assessment. However, your campus is going to receive the data from the entire assessment to do with as you see fit. So there's a lot of opportunity to gauge the quality of your relationship between your campus and community, and make strides towards improving that in ways beyond what our pilot is focusing on. Is your campus and community interested in measuring environmental factors related to underage drinking as well as high-risk drinking? And do you wish to utilize a data-driven approach to increasing town-gown relationship quality and reducing underage and high-risk alcohol consumption? So if you're saying yes to these, then you would be most ideal for our pilot study. So I'm going to let Steve... Go ahead, Steve. I'm going to let you jump in and talk a little bit about your mobilization cycle.
All right, so this comes from another paper that I did for a journal called Metropolitan Universities, and it simply lays out what I call the mobilization cycle for doing this kind of data collection. The most important part of this, as you can see, is that this is actually a circle. And so the idea behind this is that you are going to rinse and repeat, if you will. Again, the idea would be that you are heading towards a data collection, but that would be a first step in terms of providing yourselves then with a baseline of information about where you are, and then trying to figure out how much further down the road do you want to go, and then basically resample and look at what kinds of potential changes may have occurred inside of the relationships that you're seeking to impact. So first step is awareness raising. For us, when we did the pilot in Mansfield, it was very, very important for us to get the word out on why it was that we were doing the collection of data on the campus-community relationship. And so we went to a lot of different sources. We used our media, we used social media, we used the local newspapers, we did television stories, all about our interest in finding out where we were as a campus and community and how we could improve upon that. The second step was then the way that we could begin to build coalitions. And those coalitions were very, very important to us because we needed help in getting people to actually participate in the survey. And so we had identified 3 primary groups that we were interested in because those were the 3 groups in which our students had the most contact with the community. And so that included, first of all, reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce. And that was because we had a large business and industry internship program in which we were delivering students to the doorsteps of businesses in order to create internships and cooperative experiences. We also reached out to the local school superintendents because we had a large teacher preparation program in which we were placing students. And then third and finally, we reached out to the United Way. And the United Way was a big partner because a lot of our social science and social work students gain internships and other placements through the local nonprofit organizations that the United Way funds. So those 3 groups, as well as the media that I had mentioned already, were very significant coalition partners and helped us to send the URL out that allowed people to participate. And we were actually very successful. We had approximately 750 people from the community participate. In addition, we also had about 125 people from our campus, and that included faculty and staff and other leadership on the Ohio State Mansfield side. And because we had used a partnership with our technical college, we also had about 150 people respond from the North Central State College side. All of that meant that we had a tremendous amount of data. And so the data gathering had taken place over an approximate 3-week period. We think that 3 weeks is about the right amount. You launch it and send out the first set of emails that invite people into participation. And then a week later, you send out a reminder, and what you end up seeing is another spike in participation. And then one final reminder at the beginning of that 3rd week, usually a lot less of a spike, but still at least you catch some of the stragglers who really did want to participate. So that's the data gathering part, and that's a pretty compressed period of time, 3 weeks. And again, that can be modified if people need a little bit more time. That's certainly not a problem. But then the task moves to interpreting that information. Now, the happy news is that we've developed our website far enough along where you will get an automatic report of all of the data. So it will give you a report of all of your demographics. It will tell you how many people from the campus participated, how many people from the community did, and who were those people on the campus, how many faculty, how many staff, how many students, how many people in the community, how many business leaders, how many people from nonprofits, how many people are local government elected officials, how many people are clergy, and so on. All of that information is done, as well as demographic information on all of the answers to all of the questions that you have. However, in addition to gaining access to that report, which is downloadable, you also, at the same time, have access to your own data. And so we will also supply each of the organizations who are involved in this, we will supply you with an Excel file of all of the data, the raw data as well. So you're certainly free to do additional analyses as you see fit. And then, so that the interpreting information is largely done for you. You can use those reports and take that out into the community. When we did this in Mansfield, we provided that data in two different ways. One, we created town halls, and I literally did town halls on both my campus and in the community about the results. And then we also did a series of focus groups because we were interested in finding out what people thought at a more micro level. So we did focus groups with business owners, as a for instance, and we also did a focus group with school personnel, and so on. The final part of all of this mobilization cycle then is creating an evidence-based action plan. So where do you want to go and how do you think you're going to get there? For us, to give you one example, we recognized that our educators, our local educators, were not as comfortable with us and did not see us as actively involved in the community, and in particular with the educational community, as we might have been. And so in those focus groups, we found out that there were some specific professional development activities and some mentoring of students that we could be doing to take us to that next level. And so again, that's just one of several ways that you can set up a plan, an evidence-based action plan for where it is that you want to go. And in fact, Mansfield is planning now on doing its next data collection in early fall to see how far we've actually gotten since we last did this. So that in essence is the mobilization cycle.
So one of the things that those of you who are familiar with prevention and are working in prevention may have seen is our flower on the right-hand side, the Strategic Prevention Framework, which comes out of SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And it's really just a planning process for prevention efforts and engagement. And you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities between the Strategic Prevention Framework and Steve's mobilization cycle. And so we can do these things at the same time. Really, only the biggest difference is Steve talks about capacity building or building coalitions prior to gathering data, which makes sense for the project that we're working on now. But because they mirror each other so nicely, we can implement both of these strategies at the same time to be able to collect data, interpret that information, and be able to implement some strategies that work for your campus and community or make sense for your campus and community, and hopefully will make an impact on high-risk drinking rates within your campus as well as the community. So a little bit more about the pilot. The Ohio College Initiative is going to pay for at least 3 campuses to complete the OCTA. And we say at least 3 campuses because there is a possibility that we will fund 4. We initially were thinking that maybe some smaller campuses would be interested in this, and we would have fund 3 smaller campuses. But as we've been talking about it, we've had a lot of interest from larger campuses as well. And we think it's important to have a comparison group. So we may be interested in funding 3 smaller campuses, or if we have a lot of interest from our larger campuses, funding 2 smaller campuses and 2 larger campuses. Campuses must either have a current group of campus and community members working to address alcohol issues or be willing to create one. And so that could take the form of lots of different things. It could be a coalition, it could be a task force. The group may not have alcohol as their primary focus, but are addressing alcohol issues or willing to take on addressing alcohol issues. So it could be a current group that is engaging all of those different sectors on your campus and community that are willing to take this pilot on. And if that does not exist in your campus, that doesn't mean that you cannot participate, but you must be willing to create one and be able to identify how you're going to do that in the application. Campuses will have 4 months to prepare for the OCTA implementation. As Steve mentioned, we'll be looking at actually implementing that in October. And I'm going to throw it back to Steve. I want him to share a little bit more about what exactly campuses can do in those 4 months to prepare.
So one of the things I think that would be really important, as Cindy's already been alluding to, is being able to bring a group of campus and community leaders together. I think this would be a very helpful way of beginning to plan this out. Some of you may already have an active town gown council, and in fact, we've found, and certainly this is talked about by the International Town Gown Association, that those campuses and communities that enjoy more harmonious relationships are those who actually have active town gown councils. Just as for instance, Ohio State Mansfield and North Central State College have an active campus community panel that regularly works with regards to what we call the campus district, which is an economic development plan for the area immediately surrounding the 640 acres of our campus. You may also have other kinds of issues that you've been brought together to deal with, or you just may have an active general campus community relationship or town gown council. We would like to see that group, if you do have one, we would like to see that group become more involved with some specific alcohol prevention issues, and we think that certainly the Drug Free Action Alliance can help with regards to inserting those issues into the dialogue that you are having. But nevertheless, we think that for those of you who do not have an active council, that's really going to be one of the most important steps that you're going to need to take. And it can coalesce around the idea of the data gathering itself. That might, in fact, be the best reason to get together, which is to talk about what it's going to take to actually get people to participate in this survey, and then by extension, what is it that the campus and community hope to get out of that data gathering process? Again, following both the SAMHSA wheel as well as the mobilization cycle that we've talked through already.
Thank you. So once the OCTA has actually been completed and you have your data, you'll be able to start working on developing a prevention plan. And the Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery will be available to provide technical assistance to your campus in the development of that plan. One of the other things that, to back up just a little bit, during those 4 months, I also want to encourage campuses, although this is not required to participate, there's also other opportunities to gather data or at least bring your data in one place and do some other environmental scanning to get a better idea of what kind of alcohol outlets and establishments you have around your campus, and we can provide some tools to help you do that. Campuses will be able to develop that prevention plan, and they'll have until the end of May of 2018 to create the plan. So although a campus may be in a position to begin implementation during next fiscal year, implementation of the prevention plan is actually not a part of the pilot, although we do hope to provide make some grant funding available to assist with implementation projects during fiscal year 19. Campuses also will have access to all of their data, as we've mentioned, and can use it to strengthen their town gown relationships beyond the substance misuse prevention piece. So, of course, we at the Ohio College Initiative are really interested in how you respond to those few questions that have been added that are specific to alcohol, but your campus has access to all of the data, and we encourage you to use it in other ways to benefit your campus and community. So here's just a timeline. We've already talked about a lot of these dates, but the applications are due May 5th by the end of day, May 5th. So you still have about 2.5 weeks to be able to complete those applications. If you haven't had the opportunity to start taking a look at them, it really is fairly simple. It's a SurveyMonkey application. There are not a lot of questions. The questions will depend on whether or not you already have an existing coalition, because we'll want to hear a little bit more about that. If you don't have an existing coalition, we'll want to hear a little bit more about how you plan to bring some campus and community partners together for this project. But the questions are pretty simple, and it shouldn't take too long for you to be able to complete this application, at least compared to some grants that maybe you have had experience with. We'll be notifying those who have received the award by May 17th, privately and publicly, making our announcement on May 18th at our annual meeting, which I hope you'll be able to join us at. We'll talk about that at the end of our webinar. As we mentioned, you'll have 4 months to prepare for the implementation of the OCTA, and that can be getting your Campus Community Coalition ready, doing some additional environmental scans, gathering your student-specific use data if you have that, and those of you who are awarded, we can talk about some other data points that might be helpful to be able to create your prevention plan at the completion of the OCTA. During the month of October, we plan to do the implementation of the optimal college town assessment, and then once you have that data, you have until the end of May to be able to create your prevention plan. So now is your chance to ask us questions if you have them. Both Steve and I are here to answer those for you. So I'm going to give you a minute to see if you have any for us and type those in your question box. While you're doing that, I do want to mention our Ohio College Initiative annual meeting is taking place May 18th at Capital University. It is from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and we're really excited. We've got a great agenda for the event. We have Amy Lukes from the Ohio Program for Campus Safety and Mental Health that'll be talking about how campuses can address and support students with mental illness, how they can promote mental health, and what are some of the trends that we're seeing on college campuses. Ken Hale, who is a co-director of Generation RX, will be talking about the newly released Generation RX University tools. We also have a webinar through the Higher Education Center about those this afternoon. If you're interested, you can sign up for that at the Higher Education Center website, hecaod.osu.edu. Sarah Nerad, from our Director of Recovery at the Higher Education Center, will be sharing the new Recovery Ally training and how you can support students in recovery on your campus. And we have people who will be presenting that have received the Push for Prevention stipends. They will be presenting their projects at the meeting as well. We have a presentation about marijuana trends among college students happening. It's a free event and we're very excited about it. I'll send you a link so that you can register. So we have a couple questions coming in. For schools who are not selected as part of the pilot, how much will it cost to do our own? Steve, I'm going to deflect to you.
Sure. So Cindy and I have been talking about this because we're trying to free up some additional funds that would allow folks to do that. But if folks wanted to basically add on, we think that throughout this entire year, that it would be necessary to come up with funds that would be probably around $1,000, because that's what we've set the current figure at for folks who are participating in this particular pilot. So we're thinking around $1,000, and that's again to use the tool as it currently exists without any sort of modification whatsoever.
Okay, that looks like our only question right now. So Steve, you must have done a great job explaining everything. If you have any other questions, I encourage you to reach out to us. You can reach me at clowner@drugfreeactionalliance.org. Here's some additional information about the Ohio College Initiative annual meeting. You can register using this Google short link. That is a 0 following the D, not an O. And we have recorded this webinar and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel at Drug Free Action Alliance. If you need a little refresher, we encourage you to apply. We're really excited about the pilot, and I hope that you're interested in participating in it as well. Steve, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank those of you in attendance for joining us, and I look forward to seeing your applications.
Thank you again, Sandy, and thanks again to the Drug Free Action Alliance for underwriting all of this.
You're welcome. I do have one final question that just sneaked in. I want to answer that. If you do the OCTA on your own outside of the pilot, will you receive support from the Ohio College Initiative? So the Ohio College Initiative provides a limited amount of support at no cost to campuses just for campuses being a member, so campuses are able to take part of that, and they are encouraged to reach out to the Higher Education Center to discuss if there's support available for them. So yes, there probably is support. There may be a small fee associated with that. It just depends on what kind of support you're looking for. However, we provide a lot of that technical assistance at no charge to our Ohio College Initiative members. Okay, with that, thank you so much.